Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, Paris is divided over Chinese fast fashion giant Shein.
Parisians waiting hours to stroll through Shein's first permanent store. But its Grand Paris opening was far from seamless. Protesters crashing the event, accusing the retailer of forced labour.
The French government threatened to ban the retailer as it set up shop in Paris. What's behind the crackdown? I'm Natasha del Toro, and this is The Take. Hi, before we continue with today's show, please don't forget to let us know what you think about this episode. Have you shopped on Shein? And let us know what you think about the French government's spotlight on the company. And if you're listening on the podcast app, leave us a 5-star review. It helps people find the show.
My name is Claire Roussel, and today I am talking to you from Paris. I'm a French journalist, and I specialize in the impact of fashion.
Well, Claire, we're super excited to have you here to talk
Thank you.
about this subject today. So let's dive right in. France threatened to block Shein, this Chinese fast fashion retailer, just days after the store opened in Paris.
Yeah.
Tell us exactly what happened.
France has been fighting Shein for various reasons. Last week, Shein had an opening of a store in a neighborhood called Le Marais, which is the heart of Paris, and the heart of Paris shopping center. And on that same day, France announced that products that were sold by Shein were unlawful regarding to French and European laws, which included Type A weapons and also dolls that had pornographic characteristics and that looked like children, which is deeply disturbing. So France seized this opportunity, as one might say, to threaten to stop Shein to be able to sell products in France. So they wanted to do that, but it's kind of complicated. So Shein retracted those products. So by European law, they can still exist today in France as they retracted the bad products. But France is really eager to say that they are surveilling Shein really closely. A lot of ministers, of people from the government have made statements saying, we're watching you. And France actually last week seized 200,000 packages that were coming from China, that were Shein packages, to just check if they were all okay.
So they are keeping a close eye on Shein now. And we should say in a statement that Shein said it banned all of these sex doll products and is investigating how these listings bypassed screening measures. You know, it also banned third-party sellers from its French site.
Yes.
So from Shein's side of things, they are trying to take action. Now, for context, we should say for people that maybe don't know about Shein, you know, this is often called a, quote, ultra fast fashion retailer. Its clothes are very, very trendy. They're also very cheap. You know, it's conquered the global market. It ships to 160 countries. And, you know, influencers worldwide display their Shein hauls online, you know, where they talk about their purchases.
Yeah.
And the company now boasts $2 billion in profits. That's a lot of money. So, Claire, you know, given its popularity and seeing that it seems to be everywhere, why is it such a pariah in the fashion world?
Shein is a pariah for various reasons, some that we might find enthusiastic and ethical, and other that might be more cynical. So Shein is what we call, as you said it well, an ultra fast fashion brand. It produces much more and much faster to extents that are extremely shocking than the other brands, even than other fast fashion brands. So of course, it threatens to its really low prices other fast fashion brands and the fashion ecosystem in general. So that's why brands do not appreciate Shein. It's because it's a really strong competitor. So they want to attack it. And of course, there are ethical reasons, because Shein exploits people as extractivist practice towards the environment.
Shein, which was founded in China in 2012 and is now based in Singapore, is commonly criticized by human rights and sustainability advocates for its labor practices and environmental impact, reportedly adding thousands of new items to its site each day. Things like dresses often sold for just $5.
But fast fashion brands and even luxury brands also appreciate to attack Shein because it steers the attention away from their bad practices, because it's been documented times and times again that fast fashion and even luxury brands have bad practices as well. For example, earlier this year, a coach has been named in a report linking it to potentially the deforestation in Amazonia and in Brazil. You know, Nike is often documented for exploitation. So it's really an industry-wide issue. I am really against Shein as well, but I think it's important for the public to understand that there's also a marketing play at here.
Right. So it's these luxury brands that are pointing to Shein for its labor practices might also have some of their own bad practices, is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, we should say Shein states on its website that it supports human rights by, quote, rejecting forced labor, harassment, discrimination, and unsafe working conditions for our employees. They went on to say that Shein also prohibits suppliers from relying on child or prison labor. So that's their way of trying to answer to some of these critics who are accusing them of these different ethical and labor issues.
Yeah.
Now, speaking about this more recent scandal, I want to be very clear that childlike sex dolls and weapons for sale on their website, I mean, that's really, really bad.
It is.
And we don't want to minimize that at all. But I think there's something interesting here. You're saying that France's scrutiny of Shein started long before all of this. So talk to me a little bit more about that. How different, is it from, say, Spain's Zara or Sweden's H&M?
Yeah, so the treatment of Shein by France is extremely specific because, as I was saying, Shein is a terrible competitor to have because of the low prices and an extremely fast and reactive supply chain. So it's important to know that in France, we have our own French fast fashion brands. For example, Decathlon, Kiabi, Camailleux. So it's considered middle to low quality. And those fast fashion brands were not able to keep up with Shein as a competitor. So it hurt the French economy. But then Shein started to attack the profits of the brands and of the bosses of those brands. So we have a lot of brands in France, and they pressured the government to do something about this unfair competitor. And that is one of the main reasons why the French government is so strong on attacking Shein today. It's not just out of the goodness of their heart, and it's also applying to brands from Spain or, as you said, from Sweden. Kind of the irony in that is that Western brands are not attacked the same way that Chinese brands are attacked, which to me is a double standard that is hypocritical and colonial in a way.
This anti-Chinese competition.
Yeah. For example, in France, we just passed a law in June, which is known to be the anti-fast fashion law. But it's not actually anti-fast fashion. The criteria that are deciding which brands fall under this law or not have been settled in a way that will only target the biggest of the biggest brands. So the ultra fast fashion brands, so mainly Shein and Temu, who are Chinese, and therefore the slower fast fashion brands like H&M, Zara, Mango, or Kiabi in France, who still have destructive practices, will not be targeted as much by this law. So we come again into this double standard, which is a shame, really.
Right, that they're targeting really the Chinese fast fashion retailers, while the European brands are also guilty of many of the same labor practice issues. Now, Claire, despite the opposition, Shein still opened its first brick and mortar store in Paris. And interestingly, it's inside a very famous, sort of beloved department store, right? For people outside of France. Tell us about this department store and its significance.
So it opened in a department store which is named the BHV, which stands for Le Bazar de l'Hôtel de Ville. So it's a department store that is supposed to be about luxury brands, extremely high quality brands. So we said before that luxury brands can have bad practices too, but the contrast between their marketing and their quality that we assume about them, and Shein's quality, which is famous for being extremely cheap, was a shock to a lot of people. The explanation for that, because from an external standpoint, you might be like, why on earth would that store accept them? The BHV has a lot of financial struggle. So that might explain why they made such a rash decision, actually, which doesn't align with their marketing in any way. So it was a scandal in a very French way. So brands decided to leave the BHV. They announced it again because the BHV owes money to a lot of brands. So they kind of seized the opportunity to go while also criticizing Shein, which is always good for business. But also, I think they were truly shocked and insulted. And globally, French people were really upset about it too. It didn't stop hundreds of people for wanting to go inside the shop. So it's a divisive topic in France. It's kind of a contrasted debate.
Now, we should also say that Frederic Merlin, who is the president of BHV's parent company, responded to all of this controversy, all this uproar of having Shein in their location. And while he has condemned the events involving the sex dolls, this recent scandal, he's also rejected this broader backlash against Shein. He said, quote, "I refuse to give in to the politically correct mindset that believes it holds the truth. Business is real life."
He speaks like a conservative man, really. He says the whole politically correct. And that's part of Shein's strategy. Actually, they try to disrupt the meaning of words. For example, they had a campaign that launched in Paris in last June saying that clothing is not a privilege, it's a right. So they're borrowing from progressive circles to try to invent a completely absurd rhetoric. Trendy clothing is not a right. We have a right to be decently paid. That's the right of the fashion workers, not of the fashion consumers. So I think it's interesting that this man and the corporation he works with are really borrowing elements of vocabulary from both reactionary circles and progressive circles. And also he's playing the card of being the disruptive, cool businessman, which I think to him is a strategy to maybe appeal to Gen Z. And for example, on the opening, there was a billboard of that man with the CEO of Shein in a really provocative way, like, we still did it. I think it's a really unhinged way to do marketing, honestly.
More with Claire after the break. Claire, we talked earlier about Shein facing, scrutiny for both ethical, environmental, and economic reasons. But, it still seems to be gaining a lot of popularity. So how offensive is it to the average shopper?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it is pretty offensive to the average French shopper for various reasons, because of course, there is an attachment to what we call le savoir-faire, so really dedication to making good products. The know how to make it, the handmade products, the luxury fashion. But also in France, this country can be quite elitist. We like to pride ourselves in being the best in many domains. So while a lot of people can say, oh, fast fashion is terrible, I don't want it, Shein is a disgrace, eventually, people still shop from fast fashion and Shein. They just won't be really loud about it. They will try to be discreet because there is a lot of snobbish people that might criticize them for that. For example, our postal service is named La Poste. And last year, 22% of the packages that were handled by La Poste were either coming from Shein, Temu. Wow. This is huge. This is actually a huge number.
So Parisians are not immune to capitalism and to fast fashion, despite all of this sort of bad press. How many people are shopping there then, would you say? How many French people?
We don't know exactly. There's been a debate. So 22% of the packages that were handled by La Poste, it means that either a small number of people is ordering a lot or that a lot of people are generally ordering. Shein claims to have 23 million people who have an account from France.
23 million. Wow.
Yeah, but it's a Shein number. And it might be exaggerated in a way, to make us think that, oh my God, the battle is over, they want France. But there was another estimation recently in Le Journal Le Monde, and they estimated that there were 3 to 4 million Shein consumers. So that's still a lot in France. We're only 68 million people. So as you said, French people are not immune to capitalism, to trend cycle, and to overconsumption. Not at all. As many countries, France is going through an economic crisis. French people are in a state of precarity and poverty, and the government has voted many budgets that attack the poorer in the countries and that do not aim to tax the wealthy or the ultra-wealthy. So it's not surprising in a way that consumers are turning to Shein or fast fashion. I'm not encouraging it, but I'm also not judging the consumers. We have created an environment that made people poor, and so obviously they want to shop cheap clothing.
Claire, I know that affordability isn't the only issue here. Alice Pfeiffer, who's a contributor to Le Monde, also wrote that the plus-size market in France is virtually non-existent. Do you think that these ultra-fast fashion companies like Shein are offering more size inclusivity than the French brands?
Yes, Alice is completely right about that. France is a very fat-phobic country in general. You can see it just through our marketing. So fashion brands, and especially luxury French brands, either they just do not produce what we call plus-size clothing, or they produce it, but they do not put it in the stores. So obviously, Shein is going to come in the conversation and be like, we're the good guys, we care about you. And actually, when you just take a step back to analyze all of those Shein strategies, it's kind of the brilliance of Shein and a lot of big corporations today is that they exploit the failures of our society. So failure to provide for decent income for everyone, failure to address everyone's body type. And so those corporations are going to use the failures of our society to pretend to fix them and to worsen all of our global problem.
So, Claire, consumers are willing to give Shein a chance. But do you think, given all these scandals and everything that you're talking about, that it can actually survive in France, when the government is so against it?
Let's take the shop part to begin with. It might be that Shein does not survive in stores because the BHV, as we discussed, is failing financially. And they kind of seem to be the only ones to be willing to give them such a big platform. So they might end up closing. That would close the Shein store. It's possible. Also, even if the French government wanted to really stop Shein from selling products in France, actually, it depends on European law. So they cannot do it alone. When it's such a big corporation, you need to have big laws that regulate customs throughout Europe and throughout the Schengen space. So it's not for today. Maybe it's not for tomorrow at all. It will depend on the European law, which is counterintuitive because France is framed as this champion and it is trying to be, but it needs the cooperation of the European Union to really attack Shein really strongly.
And I guess my last question is, in this world of, where clothing is very expensive and people do want options, they do want affordable options, they want different size options. What is the antidote to Shein?
I'm asked that a lot as a journalist who specializes in sustainable fashion, and I do not have a short answer. I think we need to have a huge look at how fashion and globally the economy works. We need to stop precarity. We need to secure people more secure wages, more fair wages. That's one side. We need to also work and legislate because corporations will never regulate themselves. I mean that. We need legislation that regulates publicity, marketing, overconsumption, all of those signals that we ingest all day that make us want to buy more, because the consumers will not be able to resist all by themselves to all of these temptations, and not just Shein, but fast fashion and any clothing that is made in bad conditions. That's the case of most clothing today, but we also need us as people, the journalists, we can spread the word, but citizens as well can pressure their representative to pass some laws to try to regulate corporations. I think that's the real answer on a global scale. And of course, on a smaller scale, you can try to buy less and better quality. But it's a formula that works for a lot of middle-class, wealthy people. But there are also people who are already buying really, really little clothing and who cannot spend more than 10 euros. So you have secondhand, which is a good option. But secondhand also has a stigma attached to it. And I know it depends on the country and the culture, so I can't speak for everyone everywhere. But I know for some people it can be hard to wear secondhand when your whole life you've been discriminated because you're not extremely rich, you do not have a lot of stuff. So you kind of really want that new stuff. And that's understandable. And again, this is solved, because this is not an easy solve, through stopping and regulating poverty and precarity. So there's no easy way. Sorry, there's no easy answer to that.
There is no easy answer.